My name is Rami Mayo from Sydney, Australia, and I've been living in Australia since 1991. So it's been about 19 years.
رامي قرب الميكروفون عليك
Sorry. Okay. There's been four major immigration Palestinian waves to Australia. The first major wave occurred in 1967, and this group of immigrants comprised predominantly of the working class and Palestinians who were not very highly educated. The second wave occurred right after the 1975 civil war in Lebanon. The third wave occurred in 1982 or thereafter, right after the Israeli invasion to Lebanon, and the fourth and the final wave, major wave, occurred after the Gulf War back in 1991, and that block of immigrants comprised of highly educated and professional people, of course. Together with Egyptians, Palestinians are the best educated Arabic-speaking migrants in Australia, by the way. Now, there is a dearth of statistics of Palestinian migration to Australia, given that Palestinians entered on so many different passports. It's thought that by 1975, the number of Palestinians were about 6,000. In addition to the problem of different passports, prior to 2001, the Australian census did not include a question of personal ancestry. In the only census that has been held since 2001, we as activists in Australia desperately tried to spread the word and importance of responding to the question of ancestry with Palestinian rather than any other Arabic nationality. In some respects, Palestinians in Australia are an invisible national group, distinctive neither by birthplace nor language. As birthplace, in official Australian census data, Palestine existed for the first and only time back in 1948, where there were about 1,658 Palestinian-born residents in Sydney. Since then, Palestine was erased and was incorporated into Israel as a birthplace, thereby including Jews and others, and excluding Palestinians born outside Palestine. Current estimates range between 10,000 and 20,000 Palestinians living in Australia, predominantly in Melbourne as well as Sydney. The Palestinian Australian community, like another minor community, is marred by factional politics. And I'm going to mention three characteristics in here. The first is the failure of the previous Palestinian representative in Canberra, and Canberra is the capital of Australia, by the way, to find the magical potion to unify the community, exacerbated this disunity. Common interests and the community needs, both on a local as well as a home-related subject matters, would have weaved a united interest and by default unity. Now, for too long, the representative in Canberra was someone who spoke very broken English, someone who was unshaven, and someone who shouted at practically everyone whom he spoke to. Until, of course, the recent allocation of the new ambassador in Canberra, Azad Abdel Hadi. A second characteristic of the community is the tension between the older and the younger generations, although this is by no means a unique feature of the Palestinian group alone. This is partly due to the competing ideas of how to define Palestinian identity, and we all know that the Palestinian identity has changed over the years. In the 1920s, it was very different to that of the 1950s, and the Palestinian identity, by all means, is now different to the 1990s or even now. Perpetual change in community identity reflects and lends itself to smaller communities, political factions, and eventually individuals. People in the diaspora are in particular affected because of this progression in identity, which is synthesis between two, not one cultures, often driven in different time zones and shaped by different experiences and perceptions from so far away. A third challenge is one where Palestinians in Australia have strong reason to feel that their struggle is often represented by the media and sometimes by politicians in the language of isms: terrorism, extremism, fanaticism, and radicalism. A four-letter suffix capable of systematic dehumanization and delegitimization of their struggle for liberation. Furthermore, whenever we as Palestinians attempt to engage with the news media, are faced with censorship of our voices and the disproportionate and virtually unlimited access to the Zionist views. Now, there are three blocks of pro-Palestinian organizations in Australia: Palestinians, Australians, and Jews. The first block comprises of entities such as the General Union of Palestinian Workers, the Palestinian Club, the Council of Australian Palestinians, and so on and so forth. By the way, if anybody wants the list of all the Palestinian entities working in Australia, I do have it. I can email it to you guys.
What was it? A list of what?
The list of all the Palestinian entities.
Entities.
You know, clubs, organizations, bodies that
I think it will be a great idea if you can supply it to the main office, so it will be listed on the website.
Sure.
Since your presentation will be also on the website.
Yes, sure. Yeah. Actually, I've made a comprehensive list of the Palestinian, Australian, and the Jewish sort of bodies. They were all set up, of course, to dispel the myths and disinformation about Palestine by actively engaging with the media, academic institutions, and so forth. Now, the emphasis of the effort, however, remains centralized on raising money and providing relief or aid to Palestine. Engaging in community development programs or indeed professional political advocacy and political lobby, unfortunately, remains deficient. Furthermore, the various entities, Palestinian entities in this case, are not institutionally based or democratically orientated in the day-to-day operations. They maintain a very rigid hierarchical structure. As far as the Australian groups, again, I do have a list. I'll just mention one which I chaired last year. It's called the Coalition for Justice and Peace in Palestine. That's a coalition for justice and peace in Palestine. Last year, for instance, we invited Sarah Roy, we invited Jeff Harper, we invited Ali Abu Niameh, and we commissioned Roy and Morgan, which is a research company, to do the first and only statistics about average Australian feedback on the Palestine issue, and we were very pleasantly surprised that probably around 70 to 75% of the normal Aussie bloke does support the question of Palestine. Now, the third and final group is the Jewish groups, which were formed after 2003. And I say 2003, this is when Hanan Ashrawi came to Sydney. Hanan Ashrawi was presented with the Sydney Peace Prize. The Sydney Peace Prize is a research body associated with Sydney University. And there was a huge protest by the Jewish boards, and they tried to impress on the former Prime Minister Bob Carr to not allow the Peace Prize to be given to Hanan Ashrawi. But fortunately, Bob Carr stood his ground, so did the Sydney Peace Prize Commission, and the prize was given, and it was a huge success for us supporting Hanan Ashrawi back in 2003. And from there on, Sydney has seen 3 different Jewish organizations, including the Jews Against the Occupation, Jewish Voices for Peace and Justice. They all work outside the confine of the Zionist sort of consensus, and they all take a stance regarding the occupation to end the occupation in Palestine. they'll